You're listening to the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. Now here's your hosts, Kevin, Derek, and Alex.
All right, and welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. I am Derek, and joined as always by your co-hosts, Kevin and Alex. Gentlemen, how we doing?
Doing pretty good here. So another Tuesday night from my fabulous hotel room. We're getting closer. So no, it's good. We got a little bit of news this week. Nothing super crazy, but starting to get a little bit of news. The combine's really going to pick up here at the end of this week, so we'll start hearing a lot of rumors as we get into the tail end of this week that I'm sure will bring interesting conversation points on the show next Tuesday. But for now, just chilling, man. I get to spend another great Tuesday night with my buddies here. So how are y'all doing?
I'm great. Happy Underwear Olympics week to those who observe as we get set for all of the fun to happen in Indianapolis. I did want to point out a couple pieces of news that are new from the last time we spoke, and I'm not sure how new they are from like today. I do know that there is a push from the Packers, keyword there, push, to end the tush push. They've submitted that to the rules committee to ban that particular play. I think if you can't stop it, you should figure out how to stop it. I don't think you should be banning certain types of plays because you can't figure out how to stop it. Figure out how to stop it. Don't let them get into a short yardage situation. The play before, you know. So I think that's interesting. We'll see what comes out of that, and maybe one that has probably some significance to us as a fantasy football crowd is that the 49ers are going to give the play calling duties to Clay Kubiak. So we've seen a Shanahan and a Kubiak work together before. Worked pretty darn well for us, Denver Broncos fans. But we're going to see Shanahan and Kubiak part 2 there in San Francisco. And I'm intrigued. I mean, there's lots of room for improvement from last year's San Francisco squad, but we'll see what comes out of that.
Should work. Gary, Clint, Clay. I mean, it's all the same offense, right? Like,
right.
It may be a different wrinkle, slightly different variation of, but the bones and the roots of that offense are very much going to be the same.
I should note, digging into this a little bit more. While Clay Kubiak will be the OC, Shanahan's still going to be the play caller. I should note that.
It's nice. It's a nice title to put on his resume.
It is probably a bump in pay too, right?
But seemingly, if you get to be an offensive coordinator for either Sean McVay or Kyle Shanahan, there's usually a head coaching job not far down the road on that one. So
I'd say the other thing though is it makes you the fall guy when things aren't going well, even if it's not your fault. Like you're the first one to go. If you're a coordinator, you're the first one to go.
It's all right.
Comes as part of the gig.
It is.
Yeah.
But
yeah. CEOs don't fire their presidents right away. They fire their general managers. I mean, just same thing.
Yeah. So the some other news kind of coming out there that's been kind of slowly brewing, it seems like, over the last little bit is the Rams and what they're doing with the quarterback situation and some kind of interesting things kind of percolating there with Matthew Stafford apparently being able to seek out what the market would provide there for him, and then more rumors where Aaron Rodgers is apparently interested in going to the Rams if they move on from Stafford. So, any thoughts around any of this?
Of course he would be.
if
course
you're a
he
team,
would be.
if you're a team that needs quarterback, would you take Matthew Stafford? Like if you're
Yes.
the Raiders,
Yes. The problem is I don't know that you want to necessarily
or I guess a rookie.
So
out of this draft class. Yeah, no.
I think Stafford can still play at a very high level, right? He's
Mhm.
not he was never a mobile quarterback, but he had some ability to move around the pocket, right? Like he doesn't have
Yeah.
as of that. Obviously he's dealt with some crazy injuries, but the dude is tough as nails and still has a cannon for an arm. I don't see why you wouldn't, right? I don't think it's a bad idea for the Steelers to kick the tires.
Mhm.
Put Matthew Stafford on that Steelers offense, and that way, when they have to throw the ball, they can get it downfield. Like that's a way different situation than what they've had since Ben Roethlisberger left that team, and even Ben Roethlisberger's last year, where all he did was check it down. Like the Steelers' offense, not that it transforms, but it definitely adds an element of being able to stay in the game. The Raiders, another team. Absolutely. Like you're poking around looking at that, Realistically, the Jets should probably poke around and look at that a little bit. The Titans, I know that they're dead set at the moment on not necessarily doing anything. They should still be kicking around and looking at that. Like absolutely. Now, I don't know if he's $50 million worth of a quarterback at this point in his career, like what he's asking for, but it's the going market and the way that the salary cap just jumped for these NFL teams, you might be able to find some of that where you didn't really think that it was going to be there before. So, yeah. I mean, if you're a piece away, what a great piece to add. A veteran presence. He's seen all the defenses. Yeah, it's a new language, but you know that he can, create chemistry with receivers quickly. And he's able to navigate game scripts and all sorts of different situations that you don't have to teach him into. Like you guys are able to then co co-brainstorm, I guess would be the right term for it, right? Like, hey, when these guys are showing this front and they're doing it, this is what I'm thinking. Like, this is what I like, and then it's not just one way of thinking. You're able to put more ideas in the basket. It's worth looking, and who knows what they're going to find. I'd take Stafford. I still think he has NFL, right? Taking the fantasy out of this for a second. I think Matthew Stafford, the NFL quarterback, is still a top 15 to 18 quarterback on any given day. And on his best days, he's still well inside the top 10.
Hey, but what if you're a team that has not a long-term solution, but a long-term plan? So I think of a team like Indianapolis. They have a plan, right, with Anthony Richardson, but it's not a solution at the moment. Is that I think Indy fans would probably be happy about that, don't you think? If they got a Matt Stafford. I'm not saying that it's totally plausible by any means because of salary cap stuff, but
it's a go for broke move for sure, right?
Yeah.
Like and that's where it bucks the plan. Is you can't bring Matt Stafford in, start him over your young developing quarterback, not expect there to be a repercussion in stunting said young quarterback's growth. So then you're automatically changing up the plan. So I don't know if in that scenario it works because your plan is to develop and build around your young quarterback, as we've seen many teams be successful doing, right before their payday sinks in. But as soon as you bring in that high-priced vet, you are now go for broke. So your plan inherently changes right away.
Think about the Carolina, even though they just re-signed Andy Dalton, but something to maybe take the pressure off of Bryce Young. But you're right. I think there's no going back.
No. you have to rewrite the entire script, right? You're not
Yeah.
able to go backwards. You just take the pages, you tear it, throw them out, and then you're on to the next plan.
Yeah.
Right. Like if you're gonna do that, you're gonna have to bring somebody in. Yeah, you're gonna have to either bring somebody in or have a young guy that hasn't taken the field before for you as a starter to try and develop that way, right? Like the Jets with Jordan Travis, something like that. That may be a potential option there, right? But other than that, if you're gonna sign him, you're either looking to get 1 to 2 years and really try and bridge that over the next little bit.
So
Minnesota?
here's a situation that I think would make the NFL really uneasy, but it could be fun. Is the Seahawks trade Geno and whatever to the Rams. So the Rams still have their quarterback. They get some cap relief because of Geno.
Mhm.
And they get a piece. And Matthew Stafford gets DK Metcalf and JSN. And Tyler Lockett still has a run game. Like, I think that would make the rest of the NFL really uneasy because that offense instantly
Oh,
turns into
oh,
fantasy gold.
I'll tell you what, Kenneth Walker's stock just like jumps through the roof after that.
I feel like they all do. I feel like
Yeah.
they all do. Like JSN and DK each jump around at least. Lockett probably jumps up 2.5 because he will be drafted in the dog heap piles of trash in 25. And
Yeah.
that would put him back up to mid to low level relevancy.
Although
That would be something.
if they do move on from Stafford, how much do you think they take a run at Sam Darnold?
So that's why I said Minnesota. You mentioned Kevin or Derek about like a player that hasn't taken the field yet.
Mm-hmm.
JJ hasn't taken the field yet, right? Like he missed all last season. Sam Darnold was a stopgap or just like a competition piece that ended up being a stopgap, and like you can't tell me that they would rather that they wouldn't take Stafford over Darnold, despite the success that Darnold had last year. I think
I agree.
Minnesota would definitely take Matthew Stafford.
And
And then Justin Jefferson would get 4,000 yards. Like we would see the likes of a Megatron Matthew Stafford connection like we did in Detroit. Like that would happen.
Yeah, the reincarnation of the Megatron Cooper Cup connection right there, right? Like
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
It
and that
would
was
be,
one of
yeah.
the things that Justin Jefferson wanted to learn, right? I mean, they covered that a couple different times during different telecasts, right? Like he wanted to be as diverse in his route running as Cooper Cup is, and as dominant as Randy Moss or Megatron in his deep game. And he studied a ton of Cooper Cup film. Like that would be really fun. That would be really fun. Like that,
It would be really
heck
fun.
yes.
right?
So there's, I guess, to the original question, is there's absolutely a market. There's probably a bigger market than anybody's letting on.
Right.
So that piece will be definitely interesting. Myles Garrett is another guy who is asking to be traded, right? The Browns are saying they're not trading him, but he is asking to be traded. But did you hear the Browns GM? He was the first one to come out and say that they viewed Travis Hunter as a receiver first, not a defensive back.
Did see that.
That
I
was
did see that. That came out
that
today,
was
I think.
interesting because the national, media has all but said, nah, he's a defensive back. Like, yeah, he might play a little bit of receiver just to throw a wrinkle in a game, but you're talking, 10 snaps or something like that. And the Browns were the first team to come out and like, look, we view this guy as a receiver. Now, the Browns are pretty good in the secondary, so it's not like they need that. So the Browns, I think, or a team that could view him as a wide receiver to start. But do you think most NFL teams are seeing him that way? Or do you think most NFL teams are seeing him as the cornerback that he's going into the combine as?
That's what
then
I
just
think they hope he
receiving.
is. I think they hope he is a corner with receiver-like ability, right? Like that is in today's NFL, like that is almost more valuable than having a he's a probably a plus receiver, and I'd say he's probably a plus corner. And I think that there are more plus receivers than there are plus corners in this league right now.
Yeah.
And I think any NFL team understands that this is a passing league now, right? And so if you can have, how valuable is Pat Surtain to the Denver Broncos? Like they shipped everybody out of that defense, right? And if it weren't for Pat Surtain like locking down one side of the field, I think it would be a different story on that defense. Now, there was a lot of other players that stepped up, right, and made life
It's nice to see him get recognized for it this year, though.
Right. But
Finally.
like, how valuable is that as a defensive staff that you have a set it and forget it corner, right? Like, that's why I think these NFL teams want that, because he is crazy athletic and has good ball skills, but can do that on the defensive side. Sometimes you have to, sacrifice good ball skills for somebody who is fast and can, react quick.
Yeah.
But man, having a corner that that the quarterbacks don't even look over to that side of the field, like that is worth its weight in gold.
Well, and the
That's why I
interesting,
think NFL teams want him as a corner.
right, and the interesting with that thing too, right? Most of the corners, when you look at this draft class and this corner class, especially, most of the corners in there are probably much more suited for a zone type of scheme, zone type of coverage. Whereas Travis Hunter is one of the few that can actually man up on somebody and play man to man as well as go into zone on that too. But really has some pretty exceptional skills when it comes to man to man coverage. So, yeah, that's another thing that kind of separates that out there. It would lead me to think more on the defensive side of the ball than necessarily the offensive side and playing receiver there. Much to your same point, but the fact that one of the few guys in this draft that can probably honestly play man-to-man coverage at that level, like that's a tough thing to find, especially in a lot of rookies coming out.
Mm-hmm.
So, but we
All
shall
right.
see.
So the last piece of interesting news, maybe not the last piece, but the last piece that's popping to my mind of interesting news, Denver's own Cecil Lammey
Okay.
came out with a report from being at the combine here already, saying that Rob Gronkowski
Yep.
is entertaining another run in the NFL, and the Denver Broncos are high on his list of teams that he is interested in. To work with Sean Payton, who he got to know on the Fox team there when they spent the year together, and also because he likes what he's seeing out of young Bo Nix. Does Rob Gronkowski coming back to the NFL give you any type of excitement?
Certainly solves the Broncos' issue at tight end, even with him being older and hasn't played in a few years. Like certainly seems to solve that issue for them.
I think he's 35 or he will be 35, one or the other.
Yeah,
Color
but
me skeptical.
he's-
I'll believe it when I see it,
yeah,
and
that's
I
fair.
won't entertain it until then.
You're not going to entertain it at all?
No, because I think I would talk myself into it, and then if it doesn't happen, I'll just be disappointed.
But
So I think I'll just leave that alone. My team has lost the first 3 games of the series, and then they win games 5 and 6, and you think, hell yeah, we got this. And then we lose win game 4 and game 5, and we lose game 6 right after that, get your damn hopes up. So I'm not even going to go down that road.
Well, but at the same time, though, Gronk comes back. That solves the issue of them not pursuing Taysom Hill or Juwan Johnson to fill in that role.
Or
You don't believe
drafting
in Adam
tight end
Trautman?
in the first round.
Correct.
And it allows them to look at other positions of need.
Right.
I really hope this happens.
I mean, you keep listening.
Really hope this happens. Like, I mean, Gronk is still freaking jacked, right?
Oh,
Like that
yeah,
is
he
one
is.
thing that you can
Still
tell.
looks good. Yeah.
He's still hitting the gym, man. He is taking care of his body still. And yeah, he may not be in like football shape, but he is still in extremely good shape. He is not one of those NFL players that retires and then you either see them balloon up or completely drop all the weight that the
Inflate.
NFL was making them keep on, right? Like Gronk still looks like Gronk. Like he looks like he's probably dropped 20 pounds for sure. But that's about it. Like,
Hey, and let's
I
be
don't know,
honest,
man.
that might help that frame, right? Like, it certainly won't help the hits, but that might 20 pounds lighter might help the frame. I don't know, man. Last time I saw him play, it looked like he was, $6 million man, just like bolted together with all of the braces and everything that he had on. Like it seemed like it was tough for him to be
Well,
playing.
his knees were his only
Yeah.
kryptonite, right? I mean,
Right.
we got a firsthand view of that as Broncos fans when TJ Ward just freaking waylaid him at his knees. That's the only way to bring him down. I'm
It is.
surprised.
Well,
I'm
yeah.
surprised Travis Kelce's lasted as long as he has without any type of significant injury. Like, kudos to him. It has been
Yeah.
unbelievable to see what Travis Kelce has done without picking up a major injury of one sort or another.
Yeah.
Speaking of, you think he's coming back? So he's still undecided.
I think there's a report today that I think said he was.
So what came out today
could be.
was
Oh,
the
he
Chiefs GM's
expects a
Yeah.
fired up
Yeah,
Kelce.
he expects him to come back. He hopes he comes back. He wants him to come back. He has not heard from Travis yet.
That's a
Now-
GM using the media saying, please come back.
Please come back. Yeah.
Hell
I
yes,
think
it
if-
is. And if
I
you're
think if
Travis, you're
Kansas
just doing it on
City-
your podcast, right? Like
Yeah,
you're gonna wait until you decided, and then you're gonna do it with your brother, and you're gonna say, "All right, I got some news." And I'm gonna tell you
I
at the end
think
of
if
the show.
Kansas City didn't lose, I think if Kansas City won, he's done. But I think the loss probably brings him back for another go round.
Maybe. Like, if I don't know if you heard some of that conversation between him and Jason on that show, but they were actually talking about it and going through that and really kind of laying it out there, both of them talking about the grind and does he really want to get up for it again and all of that. Like, I think that there's a lot more to this decision than a yes or no on that one.
And Travis, in particular, is completely set up to do whatever the hell he wants to do
Yeah.
after football. Like, he is not going to be one of those guys that doesn't know. He's not going to have to go through and wonder what his purpose is in his mid-30s. Like, what do I do now? Like, all I've done is football. Like, he's primed to do whatever he wants. If he wants to join Fox or CBS or ESPN or the NFL Network or any show, he can do that. He can get in the broadcast booth if he wants to do the broadcast booth, or he could be a dancer on his sugar mama's tour that she's doing for all. I mean, he could just travel the world with her and not do anything. Like, he is set up to do whatever he wants and not make a lick of difference. It is such an interesting situation for a human being to be in post-retirement of any profession, but specifically guys our age, right? I mean, we all joke around like, yeah, I'd love to retire, but seriously, like if your career came to an end today, would you know what you're going to do for the next 5 years, let alone the next 20 years, until you decide, you know what, I've had enough, and now I am just really too ready to be done.
Fair enough.
I don't
So
know. I think he should come back.
yeah,
I
Yeah.
don't have a vested interest, but I'd like to see him one more year. Like I'd like to know what was his last year. When you see an all-time great, I think every all-time great deserves a true swan song.
you want to see the
And
farewell tour?
I enjoy seeing the farewell tour. We've been not robbed, but there's been plenty of greats where we haven't been able to realize that it was the end, and you don't appreciate it as much. And now it's hard to make a decision a year in advance and to stick with it, but I'd like for him to be able to have a swan song, for him to get the accolades, not necessarily the accolades, the farewell, the thank yous, the congratulations from the fan base across the country who watches football, who watches the Chiefs, even if they're Swifty Chiefs. Like I don't care. Like Alex is laughing, but you know what I mean though, right? Like just the number of fans that Kansas City has garnered because he is, in a relationship with Taylor Swift. Right, wrong, or different, it's good for the NFL. It's viewership, it's ratings. It allows the salary cap to jump, $50 million over what they anticipated it being at the beginning of last year for the 2025 season. Like it's all a ripple effect. Like let everyone say thank you. So that's selfishly why I want him to come back. I'm still not going to draft him on my fantasy team, but for him and for the football aspect of
For
it,
2 weeks out of the year, he can go kick rocks, right?
right? Like, I mean, I don't want him to do well against the Broncos, but I want him to be able to get the recognition that an all-time great deserves in their last season. But
Fair enough.
I don't know. As far as ending on a losing note, how 31 teams end with a loss.
Not entirely true, but yeah. There's only one team that wins the last one. That's the better way to say
You're
it.
either first or you're last, right? So if you're last, you end it with
Easy,
a loss.
Ricky Bobby. What is? I was high when I said that.
Oh man.
Oh,
I need to watch that movie again.
yeah, it's a good one.
It's been a minute since I've seen that one. It's a good
Yep.
one.
So,
You're not first, you're last. What?
oh, well, we any other news notes that we want to hit up? Any other topics of conversation we want to rock and roll through before we get into the top 15 lessons we learned from 2024 fantasy football?
No,
A quick congratulations to Khalil Shakir, who signed a 4-year, $60 million deal with the Buffalo Bills, with 31 or 32 million of that guaranteed. So
Wow.
congratulations to him, a receiver who has under the radar been really good, and very consistent and dependable. And he got hooked up with the right organization. Yes, the right quarterback, but sometimes you can't control the luck. You just enjoy it. And it has made him a very wealthy human being. So congratulations to you, sir. Please be wise with your funds and set up your generations to come.
I remember thinking at the start of the season, like, okay, the Bills just got rid of Stephon Diggs. Who the hell is Josh Allen going to throw it to? And turns out there was nothing to be concerned about because it was an MVP caliber season for Josh Allen. So,
Yep. And they still can't win in the playoffs.
Oh, now that's not what they're paying him for.
Oh, hell.
So,
Their time is coming.
I think so too. I think the gap is closed, and I think that's one of the things that we'll get into here shortly when we get into our lessons learned.
absolutely. Are we ready to head over there? We got anything else we want to hit up?
Oh, let's do it.
All righty. So, for everybody out there curious about what we've been talking about with the top 15 lessons learned, what we've done is independent of each other. We came up with 5 takeaways for the 2024 season, and then rock and rolled through it. And turns out we had some similar takeaways across that. But we're going to go ahead and start rocking and rolling through that and talking about our top takeaways. Alex, why don't you go ahead and kick it off?
Okay, so we'll start with one that we all kind of had a similar takeaway for this. My note was that Travis Kelce is no longer a positional advantage at tight end. Derek, you had a similar one. Go ahead and chime in with yours.
Yeah, so my similar one was that there's no longer a positional advantage at tight end, right? Like the last few seasons, you really haven't seen a guy go out there and be just heads and shoulders above everybody else. When you start looking at it, it's a deal where oftentimes the guy finishing tight end 1, 2, 3 are, only about 2 or 3 points per game ahead of the rest of the guys, 4 through 8 type of thing, 4 through 10 type of thing. Like there's not near that positional advantage that that you had guys go out and do where the singular tight end was worth, if you got the top tight end at the position, he was worth 1.5 to 2 players in your lineup, putting up 15, 16, 17 points a week. Whereas everybody else at the position, you were lucky if you were getting 7 or 8. So no longer a positional advantage at tight end.
No, and then again, similar in the same vein. Mine was, if you are making the decision to draft tight end early in your fantasy drafts, you need to be 100% correct, because the miss is probably 2 times worse when you're spending that early pick on tight end and it doesn't pan out, as opposed to a running back or wide receiver. So we felt it all over, right? Mark Andrews, you felt that the beginning of the year. And yes, technically he got there towards the end, but how many people gave up on him before his run, right? And you either traded him away for peanuts, you dropped him because you were so mad, or you missed, a couple of the weeks on the rebound because you had already found another option, and then he was on the bench until you realized that you could trust him again. Obviously Travis Kelce, the Kyle Pitts thing again, but Dalton Kincaid was one that we all thought Dalton Kincaid was going to have a really good year, again, with Diggs leaving Buffalo, and he didn't. Now, injuries played into that, but he still didn't. Same thing with Sam Laporta. Like, we just listed the top tight ends outside of Trey McBride, right? And then Brock Bowers came in underneath all those guys. You drafted all these guys before Bowers in most cases. Pitts might be the exception. And so out of your top 8, only 2 hit. And then you just have a bunch of guys. Even Evan Ingram, right? A guy that we all kind of liked. You wait on him a little bit, you get some value. He was serviceable until he wasn't. And then when Trevor Lawrence crapped the bed and then Ingram got hurt, it was gonzo. David Njoku was another guy, kind of gonzo. Ferguson from Dallas, same type of situation. Dak goes down, and then he's just another guy. There was so much of that in the NFL this year that it just speaks it to me particularly, and I said this a few weeks back, and I will stand on this. Trey McBride is my number one tight end. I am going to trust him in that offense more so than a new quarterback and a new coaching staff and everything else that's going on in Vegas. So, and I love me some Brock Bowers, but I'm going to say Trey McBride's the number one tight end, and I'm not drafting any of them. Like, I'm just going to wait.
Fair enough. Alex, go ahead and lead us into the next one.
So Kevin and I kind of had a similar one again with this next point, and that is that the Chiefs. My point was the takeaway is that the Chiefs came back down to earth. Right? They were not as dominant as they had been in the year before. Obviously, we saw that they didn't get it done with a Super Bowl, but they were also just winning very, very close games that could have gone the other way in a couple different instances, and it just happened to get a little bit of luck, whatever you want to call it. Maybe there was some other things that happened, but I think that they were winning close games, which is the sign of a good team. I think if you win the close ones instead of losing the close ones, obviously you're good. But man, they came back down to earth, and I think between them coming back down to earth and other teams elevating to finally figure out what happens, right, how to get to that level, it's a little bit of the Patriots with Tom Brady effect, right? Like, they were so good, teams started to figure it out, they figured it out a way to get back up there again. But yeah, that's the note that I had, is that the Chiefs are no longer this big, bad, scary. They're a beatable team, I think, most weeks.
Fair enough.
So the one that I had that went in with that was the Chiefs offense is no longer an offense that I want pieces of, right? We talk about this sometimes. The Chiefs for a long time were, if you can get plural players from the Chiefs, you felt really good about that because, again, it was a high-profile offense. They put points up on the board. Now they're very content, and the maturation of Patrick Mahomes has been the death of their fantasy relevance because it's take what the defense gives you, just find the open guy, go down the field, don't force anything, make the play when you have to, that type of thing. And they've kind of lived and died with that for the better part of the last season and a half. So for me, Rashee Rice is the piece that I want attached to this offense. And I know he's coming back from injury, but we saw what he did and how he fits Patrick Mahomes' game so well before he got injured. So that is really the piece that I would like to have. If it's best ball, I think you could potentially look at Xavier Worthy in his maturation process from year 1 to year 2. I think you could see him take a little bit of a step, but I don't want 2 Chiefs receivers on my team in a redraft league. I only want 1, and I don't want Pacheco because Pacheco and Hunt are now splitting carries, and I don't want Patrick Mahomes because the price tag on Mahomes is still so high. I would much rather wait rounds later and grab a Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold type, as opposed to paying for Patrick Mahomes in the 4th or 5th round in a redraft league.
Yeah. And that kind of leads me right into one of my takeaways is that there's a lot of value at the QB outside of that top tier, those top 5 type of guys there, right? When you look at it, Kevin, you mentioned a couple of those names there. Baker finished QB 4 overall. He was drafted at QB 21, 158 overall. Like, that's way down there in most of your drafts. Jaden Daniels finished QB 5, was drafted QB 12, taken at the pick 102 in most cases. Jared Goff, QB 6, was drafted QB 15, overall 111th, right? Like, this is a lot of times that you could wait and take a different player in that 4th, 5th, type of round that you're taking there and get incredible value there. Bo Nix, another guy that was in there, QB7 overall, went undrafted in most leagues last year. Sam Darnold, QB9 last season, also went undrafted in most leagues. So, this is one of those that it goes back to that point that oftentimes you can wait on quarterback and you'll be looking really good for fantasy and take the pieces from other places there. Alex, go ahead and lead us into the next one.
Sure. So my next point is that do we want to do this one that you've kind of highlighted here, Derek? I saw that you kind of grouped some others together here, but I can move away from that.
Whichever way you want to go.
I'm still grabbing some numbers on that point. So I'll go to this one. Justin Jefferson might be quarterback proof, and that I'm trying to think of the last guy that we could say that might be quarterback proof. And I know that people will be like, well, Jamar Chase. Well, we haven't seen Jamar Chase without Joe Burrow largely, right? Hell, even back in college, we haven't seen Jamar Chase without Joe Burrow. Justin Jefferson put up, I think there was a little bit of uneasiness when Kirk Cousins was shipped out of town there, but he still managed to put up really, really great numbers this year. And it's been with like different styles of offense, different quarterbacks. Obviously, Sam Darnold, I think, is going to get paid because Justin Jefferson is such a great receiver. But to have 1,500 yards receiving, whether this is third highest yardage in his career in his 5 years that he's been in. So 1,533, 103 catches. That's also his third highest. Played in all 17 games, 10 touchdowns, ties a career high in terms of touchdowns. So like he is averaging almost 100 yards a game receiving, which is wildly absurd. So I think that Justin Jefferson is one of those guys. I don't want to say that he is QB proof, right? Because we've seen him with Kirk Cousins, we've seen him with Sam Darnold. There could be a bum quarterback that Minnesota goes to. Who knows how good JJ McCarthy actually is, right? Can JJ McCarthy figure out ways to get Justin Jefferson the ball? But as it's projecting right now, I was a little nervous about Justin Jefferson. I had no reason to be.
Fair enough.
So plays well in with this comment that we got from the Roll
It does.
07.
Mm-hmm.
So he had an offer come across where he gets Justin Jefferson. And to get Jefferson, he gives up Penix, Mike Evans, and a 2027 first-round pick. He also has J.J. McCarthy sitting there in the taxi squad. What say you, Alex?
I think you do it because a 2027 first, assuming that's rookie first, like you're still going to want, like Justin Jefferson is your first round pick, right? Like if that's how you're viewing it, I think I don't know what the quarterback class is in 27, so I'm not sure what you can do to reload there. But I think getting rid of Penix, look, Mike Evans is old reliable, right? And we'll talk a little bit about why he's old reliable. But like Justin Jefferson is getting you 50% more yards than Mike Evans is getting you on average. So I think that's a wild upgrade at wide receiver. I don't know. I view future draft picks as just like, that you don't know what it is, so it's easy to get rid of it, right? I don't care what it becomes, but I don't know what it is, so I don't care. Like, so I smash yes.
I would agree.
Yeah, I don't know that I'm as willy nilly as Alex is on draft picks there when it comes to that. But I'm going to put myself in a position where that 2027 first is an 11th or 12th overall pick, and at that point, it looks a lot more like a second round type of deal than a first. So, and at that point too, you've also got the years to maneuver and if you're requiring to get back into the draft class on 2027 up to a first round, you can wheel and deal and make some moves there, things like that. Like I'm absolutely smashing yes on this one. Mike Evans, maybe we got 1-2 more years. I think Justin Jefferson, you still see, good 5-6 years on that one. And so certainly fits that window that I'm looking to try and compete in for Dynasty.
No, I would agree for both of those reasons, right? Jefferson's the best player in that deal. Mike Evans is an asset that, yes, is fantasy relevant, but in dynasty formats, he is a guy that you were probably looking to move off of and recover some capital while he's still putting up 1,000 yards and double-digit touchdowns. You know, wow, if that lasts for his entire career, but maybe it doesn't. So pivoting to Jefferson off of that and a quarterback where we've seen a small sample size and a 27th first, to Derek's point, that I'm banking on it being a late first round pick. So I don't feel like I'm missing a Bijan or a Justin Jefferson or a Jamar Chase at the front end of the draft. Like I don't feel like I'm missing that. So I would agree. I'd smash this. Take Jefferson on the roster. Yes, you have McCarthy. See how he develops, but it gives you time. And it also lets you know that, what, if you need to be looking at a quarterback because you're trading away Michael Penix, okay, fine. So now if you're looking at a quarterback in this class, you see where the landing spots are. Hopefully your rookie draft is after the NFL draft, and you're able to, pick a guy up in the second or third round of your rookie draft this year and see how he pans out.
Right. And with Dynasty, it is very much a you'd rather be a year early than a year late, and you're right there in that territory with Mike Evans for sure.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I got one more note about Justin Jefferson, who is averaging 1,600 yards a season. That's his average right now, over a 17 game, because he missed 7 games last year and is still averaging over 1,000 yards.
Isn't he the most yards by a receiver to start their career in NFL history?
He is at an all-time career record for yards per game. He leads everybody in terms of yards per game. So yeah.
Okay. So
if he maintains that 96.5 that I've mentioned.
Yeah, it's a lot of usage every single game. So
crazy. It's crazy.
So that takes me to a little bit of a different point, but right. So Alex is saying Justin Jefferson QB proof, and Justin Jefferson certainly has the star power and the kind of that top end power that you're looking for. But the point that I'm looking at and when really kind of looking at these things, depth matters far more in these drafts and far more in roster construction than what you think, right? And I think that was made abundantly clear over the last 2 seasons when you saw, 2023, you saw a ton of running backs go down, right? It seemed like every time you looked up, there was another running back that was injured, that was down, things like that. This last year, we didn't necessarily see that out of the running back position, but we saw that certainly out of the wide receiver position, where it was, seemingly every time you looked up, there was another wide receiver that was down, missing a significant amount of time, whether it's, 4 or 5 weeks here, whether it's the rest of the season. Like, if you don't have the depth to be able to navigate that, that's going to put you in some desperate situations when looking at that, trying to salvage a season and making moves that you probably shouldn't be making at that point.
No, absolutely. And kind of ties in with one of my other observations and led briefly into this with the first one on the tight ends, but the first 7 rounds of your redraft league, nothing but wide receivers and running backs. Nothing but. And really, if you just kind of know you're going skill position, it allows you to ebb and flow with whatever the draft board gives you in each round, right? You're not kind of pinned in. You just know that you're going to sit back on quarterback and you're going to sit back on tight end. And so for the first 7, maybe even 8 rounds, you are hammering running backs and wide receivers. You end up with 5 and 3 in any composition of. And then you can take your flyers late off of that. But with the tight ends that you're able to pick up late, and most likely streaming tight ends, and the quarterbacks that were falling to the 9th, 10th, 11th undrafted type rounds that turned into top 10 type quarterbacks, no sense to go chasing that. None whatsoever. Yes, we'd all like to have Josh Allen week in and week out, but what are you giving up because of that? Because now, if you have a quarterback that, yeah, he's 4 points behind Josh Allen from QB 8 to QB 1, okay, you're 4 points behind Josh Allen, and you were chasing the quarterback run, or you can mitigate, to Derek's point, an injury, and so instead of giving up 6 or 8 points a week at wide receiver or running back, you have the depth to plug in, and now maybe you're only sacrificing 1 or 2 points. And so it closes that gap more so than what chasing quarterback would do. Or tight end, for that matter.
Absolutely.
Co-sign. All right. My next point is that I was very wrong about the Miami Dolphins this year. Very wrong about them. I had kind of loaded up on Dolphins players. I thought that it was going to be the team that you wanted to get a piece of because it would be exciting. Now, there were pieces that were good. I think Devon Achane was good at points. I think Jonnu Smith was great at tight end, right? I don't know what he finished, but he was up there. And really kind of put to the point that we had earlier that there is not really a separation anymore at a tight end advantage, because Jonnu Smith was probably not on many people's radars heading into the season, but put together a very solid season. But the point that I wanted to make about Miami's offense, one, the Tua injury really derailed that team. Missing those games when he did. He only played in 11 because he missed 4 and then was inactive for 2 at the end of the year when the season was over for them. Missed 5 and then was inactive for 2. I think that math works. They were 18th in yards per game. They averaged 325.9 yards per game. That's 18th in the bottom half of the league. They were 16th in red zone scoring. So they weren't, even when they weren't moving the ball, they weren't, converting touchdowns when they were getting into the red area. So I thought that team would be a lot better than they were. Injuries obviously played a role in that, but injuries are a part of the game, right? And you have to be able to prepare yourself for that. And realistically, guys, like Tua went down and they didn't have an answer as a backup quarter. They didn't have a serviceable backup. And I think teams are starting to find that you need to have a serviceable backup because it is a passing league. Quarterbacks are taking more hits and your guy's likely going to miss some time. Like you have to go into this season thinking that way and defending against that. So I was wrong about Miami, and that kind of bit me a little bit when it came to some of my fantasy choices. Even though I was able to navigate some, it was not great.
So I'll echo some of that because the way that a lot of the draft boards fell in best ball, Miami was a pretty easy team to stack in best ball in a lot of different ways, right? And I, needless to say, did not perform well in those best ball leagues because I was so heavily involved in Miami Dolphins offense. But one of my takeaways was Tyreek is no longer elite. He is still a good receiver. He still has the potential and the ability to pop to be a wide receiver, like the wide receiver one, even once, maybe twice a year. But holistically, much like with the Chiefs offense, and how it's been sputtered slightly, I think defenses have finally figured out how to play Tyreek. And he has not been able to get loose. They put a ton of pressure in Tua's face when Tua was in the games, right? This isn't just a Skylar Thompson type deal where Tyreek went non-existent. But even once Tua came back, we thought we'd see Tyreek flash and save the day going into the fantasy playoffs. And it was not the case at all, to the point that Tyreek said, "I want out of Miami," and then later walked back that statement, but he said it. I think defenses have kind of figured that out. I think they kind of have a beat on McDaniel's offense, if you will, right? And they're really going to have to do some soul searching and try and put in some different wrinkles and look a little differently going into 25, because for having Devon Achane, Jalen Waddle, Jonnu Smith, Tyreek Hill, you should feel pretty confident with those assets running out for your offense. And the Dolphins, to Alex's point, were a middling offense. And it was nothing but frustration from a fantasy owner's standpoint. So Tyreek Hill has regressed, whether it's age, whether it's defensive philosophy, whatever have you, but he is no longer a wide receiver that I'm going to target in the first round of a draft.
Fair enough. And that first round of the draft, right? Like you look at this last year, you saw a bunch of wide receivers taken in the first round, right? Like far more than what you've seen in years past, right? Like there were a lot of years in years past where there might be one, maybe two wide receivers taken in the first round. This year, it was kind of the opposite, right? There was seemingly only about 3 running backs in most cases taken in the first round of most drafts this year, right? With those being like, CMC, Breece Hall, Bijan Robinson, but the vast majority of those were then taken as wide receivers, and only 50% of the top 12 wide receivers that were drafted finished inside the top 12, right? And there were some of those had to do with some injuries, time missed, things like that, but that's a very large percentage of players that you spent first round capital on that didn't hit and didn't perform up to that. So that's a kind of an interesting thing there, and something that I'm going to be keeping a rather close eye on, and really seeing if I can't find some different correlations in that as to, how in the world this was 50% wrong on this, or only had a 50% hit rate for the top 12 wide receivers to finish inside that number.
Look at quarterback injury rate.
Yeah.
And see where it's tied. And just in general, right? Like CD, right? I think technically did he finish in the top 10, even with sitting out the last 2 weeks? But he wasn't wide receiver 1 or 2 where he was drafted.
Right. He was wide receiver 8.
Okay. So, I mean, you kind of count him in that list, and maybe you kind of don't, right? He's still top 10. But was he first round good? I mean, if you went and redrafted it after the end of the 24 season, he'd fall in the second round. Right.
And at that point, the hit rate actually moves down lower than that type of thing. Right.
Oh, gosh. Yeah. I mean, you had so many guys. Wide receiver was brutal this year. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes back to speaking to these other points. It's depth. It's hammering the skill position. So that way you can You have the depth, so you're not taking as big of a hit on your weekly total, right? Because that's what we're after. We love the players, but the numbers make the players for fantasy. The players don't guarantee you any numbers. So you're trying to hit a target. In a half-point PPR, you are targeting, you want 115 to 120 points a week. Like,
Yes.
that is what you're after. So
Right.
you got to figure out how you're going to get that. 22 points from Josh Allen. Okay, well, that's great, but what did I sacrifice? Because I can get 19 points from Baker. So, I mean, it's all part of that. And we'll get down to that much closer to the draft, right? We do a big draft special where we talk about different things, but it's all food for thought. But that's one thing that you're after. It's not necessarily certain players, it's point totals or projected point totals, what we think they're going to do on average. Because if I can hit 115 to 120 points weekly in a half-point PPR, the success rate is extremely high. And with that high success rate means I get into the playoffs. And if I get into the playoffs, I have a chance for a championship. And that's what we're playing for. Bragging rights, championships, cash, what have you. So all the lovely things. But that'd be an interesting one, right? See if their quarterback went down for any time, and that's what caused the receiver dip, or if they just got hurt, right? Keenan Allen got hurt. He hadn't been hurt for years, right? Struggled early on in the year or in his career, and then he was like an Iron Man, always playing. And then Keenan Allen got hurt this year in Chicago. Was it just Caleb Williams, or was it the fact that Keenan Allen, his age finally caught up to him and he got hurt?
Devontae Adams was another one that missed time. Like Puka Nacua was another guy that missed time. There's a lot of those kind of corresponding things in there. And then you also had a lot of guys elevate that, certainly had a lot of value in there as well. But so it's one of those that also kind of goes back to that point that depth matters and really hammer those skill positions, because, right, if you're only going to have a 50% hit rate here on that, you got to make up for that other places. And if you've got 3, 4, 5 wide receivers deep that you can rotate through, and you can start playing matchups, and you can be a wide receiver by committee, you can really, really do some damage during the season.
Mm-hmm.
So,
absolutely.
Real quick before we get into your next one, Alex, Jordan had this question: didn't Tyreek tell Miami to peace out? He did, and then as Kevin said, he walked it back. So
it was a comment of passion is what they're chalking it up to. He was frustrated, and someone stuck a microphone in his face, and he couldn't help himself, and then has later walked that back, saying he does want to be a part of Miami. He likes the coach. He likes the offense. He was frustrated. So,
and he should have been, because they were a disappointment this year.
Yeah, well, and it's human. It's human error. Like, yes, these guys are trained, and they do have training about how to speak in front of a microphone and what to say and maybe not what to say. Like, these organizations absolutely have PR people who teach, especially these star players. Anyone who's doing a radio show or a podcast or anything like that, like, they absolutely have, like, okay, this is. This is the view that you want to take, and everything else. And it's been that way for a while. I'm gonna rabbit trail that comment for just a second. When the Chicago Bears won their Super Bowl, okay? Everyone talks about Refrigerator Perry rumbling into that end zone. And I was watching a show the other day, and they're talking about Walter Payton. Walter Payton had one of his worst games as a professional in that Super Bowl, and he was mad. He was mad at the coaching staff for letting Refrigerator Perry get that ball at the goal line. He was mad because he had been stuffed all day. He was sulking, even though the Bears had just won the Super Bowl. and they were in the back, and team was celebrating. Walter's, in his locker room, he's brooding, for lack of a better term. And his agent got a hold of him. He said, I need you to think about something before you leave your locker room and you have to answer all these questions. Do you want to be the guy who comes across as completely self-absorbed because it was all about you, and yeah, you didn't have your best game maybe, but your team just reached the pinnacle of your sport? Or do you just need to swallow this for a little bit? Talk about the team, talk about the team success, talk about the team overcoming challenges, and let it go. Because if you go out and you sulk and you get mad because you didn't get the ball, you are going to come across looking like a self-absorbed jerk, for lack of better terms. I'm completely paraphrasing there. But it started that far ago, right? Where people were acknowledging that whatever these players say gets blown out, good and bad, right? Gets blown out of proportion. But it started back in the 80s.
It's 40 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's carried on for that long. Tyreek, he got caught with a hot mic. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. That's why teams hammer quarterbacks and how they speak and how they present themselves and how, they take on the adversity and put the blame on their shoulders, and not necessarily do the Aaron Rodgers of throwing your teammates under a bus. But they say, that was me. I read that wrong. I need to, we'll get it fixed, but that one was on, whether it was or not. That's why teams want these quarterbacks who do that, because it just takes away some of the potential animosity that builds, because every media outlet is looking for attention somehow, right? Alex can speak to this. Like, you guys want to present the news in a way that is a little different, but that way people remember you and go back to your news station and look for your news station for certain things, right, wrong, or indifferent.
Yep. Yeah. That was a great segue, because my last point is Aaron Rodgers, happy trails. I think that there are teams that just aren't willing to deal with everything else that Aaron Rodgers brings with him now. And I think it's great that he goes and has his platform to say whatever he wants to say. It obviously landed Pat McAfee a job at ESPN, right? Like, getting that Aaron Rodgers interview is point number one why ESPN wanted to pick up Pat McAfee's show, because Aaron Rodgers is such this enigma, and he's a good quarterback. The dude finished 8th in yards last year. Like, he was really, like, fine. They didn't win anything, but I think there were bigger issues in New York aside from Aaron Rodgers, though I do think Aaron Rodgers was the biggest issue. But there were more issues than just Aaron Rodgers. So I think that Aaron Rodgers, now that it's official, or as official as offseason moves can be without the league year starting yet, the Jets have moved on from him. I don't know. We had this discussion to start the show. What teams would kick the tires on Matt Stafford? And I think about every quarterback starved team would kick the tires on Matt Stafford. Do you guys think there's a team that would take Aaron Rodgers outside of Las Vegas because they'll do anything?
Well, there's a lot of teams I think would.
Mark Davis will do anything. Mark?
Yes, you're correct on that. But yes, I think that there's several teams out there that would do it, right? Because if nothing else, it'll sell tickets. It'll draw attention into that organization that may not get that kind of organization otherwise. Jordan makes an interesting point asking about the Rams here. That is right. Like, he sat there and said that he would go play there. That's an organization that could probably, temper that, right? Like, Sean McVay is very cemented as the head coach, and seemingly runs has that locker room pretty well dialed in there. Not only that, it would put Aaron Rodgers back in that type of system, right? Like where he won several of those MVPs was playing with Matt LaFleur. Matt LaFleur is an offshoot of the McVay type of system there, right? And so I think that could be a fit there. But yes, there are certainly teams out there that may shy away from that because they don't necessarily have the culture, the personnel in place to be able to handle that.
I think that's the important thing there, Derek. The culture or the personnel. Aaron Rodgers doesn't work in Pittsburgh, right?
I think he does.
Yeah, I think
Oh.
so too. I think Tomlin and the culture are so in line there that it wouldn't matter.
Think of all the stuff that Tomlin buried.
Mm-hmm.
Ben
I know.
Roethlisberger and his young
Transgressions.
career, right? Yeah, with whatever his young career, right? He made some mistakes, but then dealing with Antonio Brown and Le'Veon
Mhm.
Bell, and no one had any clue how bad it was until those players left Pittsburgh. And once those players left Pittsburgh, other teams who don't have that culture couldn't keep it in-house and couldn't keep a lid on it. And you're thinking, wow, these guys are cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. Like they're just stinking bonkers. But somehow Tomlin has been able to keep that under wraps. Like the whole Russell Wilson, Justin Fields thing. The way that we as Denver fans heard everything about Russell Wilson because the Broncos couldn't keep it under wraps. They're rotating head coaches, right? They didn't have a culture built up. They were, moving and moving and moving guys over and over and over. They didn't have a culture built up. He goes into Pittsburgh and Tomlin said, yeah, Russ is our starter. And then he's hurt. Justin Fields plays. They start out 3-1. 3-1? Whatever it was.
They won
Yeah.
several of those games.
And then Russell Wilson's healthy, and he instantly goes in, and you never hear another peep. Guys, you didn't hear a damn word about it. Like, and that is why I think Pittsburgh could absolutely absorb the Aaron Rodgers personality and not have it be a deal. I think the Rams could, yes, Sean McVay. I don't know if many other teams could. The Raiders can't. The Jets couldn't.
I think
Right?
the Raiders.
You're rotating head coaches, right? Like you don't have a culture
Pete
in
might
the
be able
clubhouse.
to handle it, right?
I think if
Pete might be able to handle that.
I think if Pete had been there for a year before bringing it in, right, and like having imprinted that team a little bit, because same thing going back to the Russell Wilson side of things. Seattle, managed to keep a lot of that in-house there as well with all of that nonsense to the point where they sold a bill of goods and got a king's ransom for a quarterback there, right? Like that's he's probably one of the coaches that could build that locker room and keep that in-house. But it's one of those that I don't know that I'd want to go that route, bringing in and instituting that culture and bringing in a personality that we've seen like that.
And that may challenge you at every step of the way. It's hard enough to win football games in the NFL. It's doubly hard to try to build that culture while being challenged, right? Throughout the course of that. I think that's not something that I think a lot of teams are very interested in. A lot of coaches may not be interested in it. A lot of GMs and owners, I think, would be very interested in it.
Yeah. Well, apparently, right? This is reports and through the rumor mill. When Glenn sat down with Aaron Rodgers, it was two things that he asked of Rodgers. One, participate in all the off-season activities so that way we can get a good fundamental base. Like, don't sit these out. We need you here. If you're going to lead the team, we need you to be here and be participating in these things. And two, stop the McAfee interviews. Well, the McAfee interviews, right, wrong, or different, it's like 1.25 million Aaron Rodgers makes it annually just by going on McAfee's show. So you're asking a guy to turn away over $1 million. And again, I don't care how wealthy these guys are. It is $1.25 million to go on a radio show. Like,
or a little bit every
guys.
week and not, yeah.
Yeah, for
Right.
5 minutes of your time every week, right? Or 10 minutes
Yeah.
of your time every week.
Exactly. Yeah, maybe slightly longer if it's a really insightful segment, right? You ask him if he can stick
Right.
around for one more or whatever, but other than that, that's it. Like, we cover more airtime in a 3-week span than Aaron Rodgers does in a 52-week span, and he gets paid $1.25 million for it. We do it for free. Like, it's yes, all things are relative in some aspects, but it's still over $1 million, guys. And I don't care whether you're making $30 million a year playing quarterback or wide receiver or whatever position in the NFL, or you're making $60,000 a year flipping burgers because that's what you're doing to help provide food for your family. Like, I don't care which one it is, it's still money. Like, it's still a lot of money to give up very minimal amount of your time. Like, why would you want to give that up? But apparently those are the two things that Glenn asked, or the two things that Glenn asked that Aaron was not willing to concede on. There might have been more, but those were the 2 points that the report is that Aaron was not willing to give up on those. And he said, okay, then we're going to have to part ways. So, sorry, that's a long, I screwed us up. I got us out of our flow, guys.
You're good, because I didn't really have a point on that. It's just a thing that I learned from 2024 that Aaron Rodgers
absolutely.
still good, but man, he's gone.
So here's another one that and I feel like we always kind of knew this, but every year it just kind of resurfaces of how important it is. And that is, if you are not hammering the waiver wire each week and truly scouring what is there, what is to come, and understanding what that means to your roster construction. If you are not looking and actively participating in the waiver wire, you are going to lose your fantasy league.
Right.
We saw a number of different players become available, or were always available. Bo Nix, to Derek's point earlier. Sam Darnold, to Derek's point earlier. Chase Brown, right? A lot of people wanted Zach Moss. Chase Brown didn't do much the first couple weeks, so some people dropped him. Okay, great. Bucky Irving, another guy. Pivoting through some of the wide receiver injuries and trying to find out what's what. In our home league, one of the guys in our home league had to drop Ladd McConkey. Ladd McConkey had a really good year. He was just in a pinch, and he dropped McConkey. Thank goodness, because I needed it, because Cooper Kupp was sucking for fantasy purposes down the stretch. So I plugged McConkey in instead of Cooper Kupp. Like, little things like that, you never know what gem might fall into your lap. Jonnu Smith, Alex was on the waiver wire, hammered Jonnu Smith, and got him to the finals. Not solely, but played a very large part of it, because Jonnu went buck wild after you picked him up, right? Like, he became a positional advantage for Alex because he hammered the waiver wire. So it is a point that I think we all know in the back of our head, but at the end of each year, it surfaces up again. Like, look at all these guys that made a fantasy difference from the waiver wire. They're not drafted guys. It's staying diligent and doing the right things and looking to see what the upcoming matchups are. And hey, this guy dropped someone that I know can help plug a hole on my roster because he got hammered with injuries somewhere else and had to make a hard decision. Like, okay, that's fine. Like, all the things. Hammer the waiver wire, guys, because that is truly what makes the difference over the course of the season. Sometimes trades work, sometimes they don't. You never finish a fantasy season with the exact same roster you drafted if you're doing your job correctly.
Right. Good point there. One of the other lessons that I learned was that, or one of my takeaways there, 75% of the top 12 drafted running backs finished inside the top 12, right? Like very stark contrast to the wide receiver position where, these guys were drafted extremely high and the hit rate wasn't there. With the running backs, it was kind of the opposite approach there, right? The running backs, outside of 3-4 guys, if you were drafting them inside the top 12, you're pretty happy with what that looked like, right? Obviously there was a couple of guys that didn't necessarily fit that bill. Brees Hall, CMC, those ones were some kind of bigger misses there. But outside of that, for the most part, if you were drafting a guy in the top 12 running backs, that's about where they finished.
No,
And
absolutely. And a couple home runs out of that, right? With Derrick Henry and Saquon.
absolutely.
Hey,
Jahmyr Gibbs came in on a sneaky one there at the end on just a heater at the finish of the season.
Mm-hmm.
that leads me to a trivia game I want to play with you both.
Let's get Kevin's bonus real quick on the.
Well, it ties into running backs. So
Okay.
it's a quick trivia game. I promise it's quick.
All right.
Could you name for me the top 2 yards per rushing attempt leaders last year?
What's
Yards
the
per
minimum?
rushing attempt.
What's the minimum carry?
I don't have a minimum carry, but they were. It is yards per rushing attempt.
Tony Jones Jr. at 13.8 and Imari DiMercado at 9.3.
Okay, you're cheating because there is a minimum. I just don't know what it is on this.
Oh, okay.
Let's call it 200.
Probably 200 to qualify is my guess. 200 feels fair. Let me double check that's.
Are you going with Derrick Henry at 5.9 and Saquon Barkley at 5.8?
I am not.
What was Gibbs? Gibbs felt like he should have been up there.
5.6.
So he was up there. Okay.
Yeah.
He was. Yep.
How many? Yeah, if it's not Saquon, I don't know who it is, honestly. Like Saquon, you just see all the highlights running through your head. Like if Saquon played the Rams every single week, he would have had over 3,000 yards rushing.
How crazy is that, right?
Like,
just trying to find. I had all day to find this, and then you guys threw a curveball at me. Anyways, here's the answer. Lamar Jackson had 6.6. Jaden Daniels had 6.0. And then it was Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, Jahmyr Gibbs, Lucky Irving.
Didn't you lead this off saying that it was a running back trivia question?
Yeah, it had to deal with running backs. Then they weren't the top 2. It was quarterbacks that were the top 2.
I feel bamboozled.
I feel like the question was misleading at best.
It wasn't the question, it was the setup.
Okay.
Get to your bonus point, Kevin.
All right. Here's my bonus point. Kickers are a useless fantasy roster spot and should be abolished in all leagues and formats.
I would co-sign to that. They do you no good unless you're in. What's the league? Hey, Jeff, our old friend Jeff Carter. Shout out to Jeff. I think there is still a league with him and Aki, a couple of the guys that we went to school with. The kickers only league.
I think Craig might still do that with those guys. If that's the
It
point
is-
and you're tied
it's
into
big.
it, that's fine. Like kickers only
Yeah.
because that's everything. Like, but in a traditional setup or a standard
Yes.
setup, whatever that is, you don't need kickers. Be done. Like,
Yeah.
the injuries and the shanks and the ridiculous. You don't need a kicker anymore. Like, and defenses are very close behind that. Like, I'm dangerously close to just being done with all defenses too. Like, how stupid.
Any position where you are more often than not better off not starting a player or not filling that starting spot is a needless position, right? Like if you are better off not starting a kicker than you are starting a kicker, which I think in most leagues that's generally what the consensus is, because kickers, while they can score you points, they generally just lose you points. Then it is a needless position.
So, was it championship week? The Colts was it the Colts? It was the Colts defense. I'm trying to remember
Yeah.
who they were playing. They were projected to score or get you like 7.5 or 8 points as a defense. Like they were one of the top defenses for
They
the
were
week.
the number
They
one. I
got
remember
you.
that one.
They
Yeah.
got you -2. Like you don't see that in any other thing without injury. Like you don't see Mike Evans projected for 14.5 points and then all of a sudden pops up a 1.
Yeah, plays the whole game and pops up a 1. Yeah.
Like you injuries, yes, that happens. But for a player to play the entire game, you don't ever see them miss the projected total by 10 points.
And I believe they were playing the Giants.
I believe, and that could be.
And I think that was the game
absolutely
Drew
right.
Lock had like a career day.
Hey, do you guys remember when Drew Lock played for the Giants?
Yep.
Yeah, he
Somebody
doesn't
had a
either.
Matt Flynn moment with that one.
Yeah, but
All right. We didn't need to bring that up, Derek. I'm
You're
finally
welcome.
starting to get over that. And I didn't need to hear that tonight.
Now, Kevin, I remember vividly what you're talking about with the Colts, though, because that was on one of the Friday Night Lights show. That was one of those that I was rocking and rolling through it. I was telling everybody, like, if the Colts are there, pick them up. Like, this is, and man, did that not pan out. Like that was bad. Yeah. So
I would say we will lend advice. They're your fantasy teams. You do what you need to do.
yep. Yeah.
No one bats 1,000. No one.
Nope. Some of those swings and misses are pretty hard swings and misses. So, but yeah. No, I'm right there with you. It's kickers, defenses, sayonara.
Yeah, I'd rather do more IDPs.
Yeah. Fair enough.
That's all I got.
All righty.
That's it for me.
All right. Well, that's going to take us down here to the end of it. Any final thoughts out there for the viewers and listeners?
Combine starts Thursday. I think most of it is televised. So if you're bored throughout the course of the day, find your way over to NFL Network.
Yeah, it's not so much the metrics. I'm sure there's going to be someone who blows you away in their performance. I'm always interested to see the leaking and the information that comes out from the interviews.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm really curious to see how Shedeur Sanders interviews. Really curious.
That's all he's going to do, because he said he's not working out. So
I know.
so he better knock those out of the park.
Yeah. So I don't know. Like I'm curious to see how that happens. And I still think that if the Vikings were smart, they would trade McCarthy for a first-round pick.
Yeah.
Bring back Sam Darnold, trade for Matt Stafford, whatever that looks like. But one of those two options, trade JJ McCarthy and get another first-round pick and see what happens.
Like it. Real quick before we call it a night here, a couple of questions here real quick. Scott saying that Aaron Rodgers, see that hearing the Raiders on that one, Jordan was thinking that the Raiders make sense. They don't see him wanting to draft a QB in the first round this year. Any thoughts on any of that?
I mean, they might want to draft a guy in the first round, but I don't think they're going to be able to move up enough to do it. So
right.
It could. It could. I mean, there's so many things that could go on. I think, yes, they have a need. Yes, Rodgers is still able to play quarterback, so it fits to that extent. But Rodgers is a prima donna. Who's he going to throw to? Brock Bowers is the only. Like, you think Jacoby Myers and Aaron Rodgers are going to have a rapport?
It might be a little tough.
And and he's not going to get the Raiders and Jets to reverse the trade that they made last year to
Right.
get Devontae Adams back in Las Vegas. Like, that ship has sailed. So I don't see that happening for all the outside reasons. On paper, yes, you could argue that that might be a really good thing, but I don't think that's going to pan out.
Fair enough. All righty. And then Scott had a question here as well, saying, have you guys ever had to remove a guy from a league? More than once.
Yeah, and Scott, I like this question a lot, and I've pitched it to our guys here that maybe we need to do a fantasy admin episode because each of us has been a GM of a league manager.
Commissioner, I think is
each
the
of
word
us
you're
is
looking for.
there. It is. That's the damn word. Each of us has been a commissioner of a fantasy league. And each of us has had to deal with different personalities, and sometimes it's our best friends that we still talk to on a pretty regular basis that we have not seen eye to eye with when it comes to playing fantasy football. Does it mean we're friends with them anymore? No, we still love them and we still talk to them. But boy, have we had some fantastic exits from the home league.
That's the one that came to mind for me too. Was
that was a pretty fantastic exit. There was that from everybody who was not involved in it, like that just straight up eating popcorn to see how that one was playing out in the chat. That was a good time. But then also how to deal with like when somebody is very obviously tanking and somebody is taking advantage of that and how you can react to that. So I think I'm going to pitch that to the guys. And Scott, the answer is yes, but I think that we could probably provide you some ways to go about doing that from our own experiences. And I'd like to do that in a future episode.
we can do that.
Yeah.
I can tell you that when in the off season, it's no big deal.
Yeah.
Right? Like if it's in the off season, I feel like everything's above board and it's no harm, no foul, and we just kind of let things passively go through. We've had one in the home league, and there's been some others in other leagues that I'm sure we've all been a part of. I know Derek and I have been, where in the middle of the league, it gets really loud and really aggressive. And I would tell you from a commissioner standpoint, I want it loud and aggressive before I remove them. And I want to make sure that I remove them before they bounce out. And it goes back to the idea and perception that you are controlling the sanctity and the standard of the league. It's not that you are the league god, but it is that you understand the responsibility of being the commissioner and the, I guess, rule enforcing figure of the league that everybody agreed to. So if it's in season, I kind of want it to be loud, and then I want to boot them before they dump, because I feel like it gives everybody an idea of, oh, okay, like here we go. Like he's got this under control. Like he solved the problem, we fixed the problem, and we move on. So yeah, I'm sure we can do a commish admin type league. That'd be fun. We can talk about a couple different topics that will help make it a little bit smoother over the course of years, and not just, taking it 1 week at a time.
Right.
It's also not scary being a commissioner. Like it seems like it might be a lot of responsibility. It's not. You can handle it.
Well, some of that too depends upon the league itself, right? Like there are some leagues that I've been the commissioner of that it is a lot of work and a lot of work to go through it and go through that, right? There's other leagues that everybody understands what it is and they almost just kind of police themselves a little bit, right? Like you get folks calling one another out on some things, and makes for a very fun league, right? Like and other ones where it's you've got to be the hammer a little bit, right? And so some of that just kind of comes down to reading the room there. But to Kevin's point, I'm also of the standpoint that if I've got to remove somebody, it's going to be very loud. Everybody's going to it's going to be done in the open. It's not going to be this behind the scenes type of thing and all of that. It will be loud. It will be out in the open, and somebody may end up feeling like a small child by the time that it's by the time that conversation's done in the chat. So,
that was such a good one. That was the first thing. That was such a good one, and it was bubbling for years and years. It was great. It was great, and it's no harm, no foul, right?
No,
it happened.
None.
It happened.
None.
He had been wanting to leave the league for a few years, and instead of, there was one route he could have taken, which was, guys, I just don't feel like doing this anymore, or the route that he chose to take. And honestly, for the benefit of everybody else, we all enjoyed the route that he chose to take.
So we didn't, and again, we're purposely not naming names. Like, we love you, buddy. I see him weekly.
Yeah.
Weekly, at least. Didn't say a word about it, either one of us, for probably 2 months. And then I don't remember who brought it up. I don't remember if it was me or him, but brought it up, and then we both kind of laughed. We're like, yeah, okay. Like, I mean, and it was just, we laughed about it, but it was an interesting one. It was like some of our other league mates who I work with, who don't know our group of friends. I walked into the office the next day, and they're like, "Damn." And even by then, I was over it. I was like, guys, I said it was brewing, and it's all good. Like, I'm not worked up about it. Like, you were pissed. I was like, I was getting my point across. Like, it is what it is.
Sometimes you have to have tough conversations, right? You use pointed language to get there.
It was done and over with as soon as it was done and over with. Like,
yeah.
Hey, but yeah, we'll do a fantasy admin episode that helps, maybe might help a few people. And if you're a GM, tune into that one. We'll let you know when it is. Might be next week. Might be week later.
I'm thinking 2 weeks.
In 2 weeks time.
Let's give it a couple weeks, because my relocation is going to interfere with some things.
That's true. So we'll let you know when that's coming. And if you've been a GM or a GM, I keep going back to that, a commissioner of a league, and you have thoughts, like we love to hear how you handled some situations.
Yeah, I think I've already come up with we're just going to call it like the commissioner's corner, something like that.
There you go.
So,
I like it.
But Scott saying sounds good, and Jordan saying it's a good episode idea. So way to go, Alex.
Good job, Scott, for asking a great question.
It's true. So, but that's gonna do it for us tonight. Any final thoughts out there for the viewers and listeners?
Enjoy your week. Stay tuned to the information coming from the Combine, and we'll catch y'all next time. Thanks for tuning in.
All righty. That's going to do it for us tonight. He's Kevin. He's Alex. You can find us on all the socials, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, at Good Old Boys FF. Click the subscribe, like, all of that. I'm Derek. Have a good one. Be safe. Toodaloos.